You've stood in a crowd before, maybe at a concert, maybe on a packed train platform, maybe just squeezed into a crowded street during a festival. And at some point, without anyone saying a word, you felt it. A shift, a pressure. Something in the air changed, and your body knew it before your mind caught up. You never really stopped to ask why, but the answer is far stranger than crowds are chaotic. Because for most of human history, being in a group wasn't just normal, it was survival. Your ancestors didn't fear the crowd, they needed it. So what actually happens inside a group of humans that can turn calm into panic in seconds? And why does your body still react to it, even in a shopping mall or a stadium, thousands of years after the reason first appeared? Let's start with a strange fact. Humans are one of the only species on Earth that will run toward danger in large groups instead of scattering. Watch a flock of birds and a hawk appears, and they explode outward in every direction. Watch a herd of gazelle and a lion approaches, and they scatter too. But humans, under the right conditions, do the opposite. They move together. They cluster. And sometimes that clustering becomes deadly, not because of any predator, but because of the crowd itself. Psychologist John Drury has spent over 2 decades studying what actually happens inside crowds during emergencies, disasters, and even ordinary event exits. What he found challenges almost everything popular culture tells you about crowd behavior. The old idea, the one you've probably absorbed from disaster movies, is that crowds turn into mindless mobs the second danger appears. Panic spreads like a virus. People trample each other. Selfishness takes over completely. Drury's research tells a very different story. In most crowd emergencies, people don't turn against each other, they turn toward each other. Strangers help strangers. People slow down to assist someone who has fallen. A shared identity forms almost instantly, something Drury calls a social identity, where the crowd starts to think of itself as us rather than 1,000 separate individuals. And it's precisely this shift, from individual to collective identity, that either saves lives or, under specific pressures, turns a crowd into something dangerous. So when does a crowd actually become deadly? Not usually because of panic in the psychological sense. Physical crowd disasters, the kind that make headlines, are almost never caused by people trampling each other out of pure selfishness. They're caused by something far more mechanical: crowd density combined with restricted space. When enough bodies are compressed into a small enough area, physics takes over. Individual intention stops mattering. People aren't choosing to push, they're being moved by forces larger than their own will, like a single wave passing through water. Researcher G. Keith Still, who has spent his career analyzing crowd disasters, including the Hajj pilgrimage crushes and stadium tragedies, describes this phenomenon using something called crowd turbulence. Beyond a certain density, roughly 6 to 7 people per square meter, a crowd stops behaving like a collection of individuals entirely. It behaves like a fluid. Waves of pressure move through the mass of bodies, sometimes strong enough to lift a person clean off their feet without them ever choosing to move at all. This isn't a psychological failure, it's physics acting on biology. But here's the twist that should genuinely unsettle you. The same evolutionary wiring that makes humans move toward each other in groups, the wiring that allowed your ancestors to hunt together, defend against predators together, and raise children together, is the exact same wiring that creates the conditions for a crowd crush. Your instinct to stay close to the group, to not get separated, to trust that the people around you know what's happening, was once one of the most valuable survival tools you had. In a stadium or a stampede, that same instinct can trap you. Think about why staying close to a group mattered so much for early humans. A lone individual on the savannah, separated from the group, was exposed, vulnerable to predators, cut off from food-sharing networks, cut off from information about danger. Anthropologists studying small-scale societies have found that humans evolved an intense, almost automatic drive to stay physically close to their social group, especially under perceived threat. This wasn't a character flaw. It was one of the most successful survival strategies in the history of the species. So when modern humans find themselves in a crowd that starts to feel unsafe, something ancient activates. The instinct says, stay with the group. Don't get separated. The people around you are your information source, your safety, your escape plan. But in a dense, chaotic crowd, that same instinct that once meant survival can mean staying in exactly the wrong place at exactly the wrong time. Now here's where it gets even stranger. Drury's research also found that leadership within crowds emerges incredibly fast, often within seconds, and often from complete strangers. Someone starts directing people toward an exit. Others follow, not because that person has any formal authority, but because in moments of shared identity, people default to trusting whoever appears to know what to do. This is called emergent leadership, and it's one of the most consistent findings across crowd psychology research. It isn't chaos. It's an ancient, fast-acting social algorithm kicking into gear. The same one that likely helped small hunting parties respond instantly to a spotted predator or a sudden opportunity. Compare that to how your ancestors might have handled a genuine threat, say a predator ambush during a hunt. There was no time for a vote, no time for debate. Someone shouted a direction, and the group moved as a unit, trusting the signal without question. That split-second, trust the nearest confident voice instinct kept people alive for hundreds of thousands of years. It's the same instinct still firing when a stranger starts waving people toward a fire exit today. So why does modern crowd danger feel so different from anything your ancestors experienced? Because the environments have changed, but the wiring hasn't. Your ancestors' crowds were rarely denser than a few dozen people in an open landscape, with room to move, room to see, room to escape in any direction. Modern crowds compress thousands of people into stadiums, subway platforms, and festival grounds, environments engineered for capacity, not for the kind of open, flexible space your nervous system evolved to expect. The instinct to stay close, to trust the group, to move as one, is exactly as strong as it always was. But the physical conditions it now operates inside are utterly unlike anything it was built for. This is why crowd safety experts like Still now focus less on crowd psychology and almost entirely on crowd engineering, controlling density, flow, and exits before an event even begins, because they understand something crucial. You cannot argue with 100,000 years of evolved instinct in the middle of a crisis. You can only design the physical space so that instinct never gets triggered into danger in the first place. And this reframes something you've probably felt without ever naming it. That subtle unease in a packed subway car. That flicker of alertness when a crowd suddenly stops moving forward. That instinct to glance around and check where the exits are, even when nothing is wrong. None of that is irrational anxiety. It's an ancient monitoring system built over hundreds of thousands of years, still running exactly as designed, just operating in an environment radically different from the one it was built for. Your ancestors' crowds kept them alive by keeping them together. Your instincts still believe that's true. And most of the time, in most crowds, it still is. The overwhelming majority of human gatherings, festivals, concerts, protests, markets end exactly the way they should, safely, cooperatively, with strangers helping strangers exactly the way Drury's research describes. The danger isn't the crowd itself, it's density without space, movement without visibility, the ancient instinct operating inside a modern container it was never designed to fit. So the next time you feel that subtle shift in a crowd, that quiet change in the air before anything visibly happens, remember what you're actually feeling. It isn't irrational. It isn't fear for no reason. It's the same finely tuned instinct that once told your ancestors exactly when to stay close and exactly when to move, still running in you today, doing exactly what it was built to do, in a world that has changed far faster than your body ever could.